All right, let's get started with our CAPCOG Criminal Justice Grant Writing Workshop for fiscal year 2022 funding, the grant cycle for the 2022 funding. I am Matt Holderried, CAPCOG's Regional Research Coordinator, and today I have Ken May here, our Regional Programs Manager. I will be doing the majority of the presenting today, and Ken will be here kind of helping me sift through all of the questions that you guys have, make sure nothing gets off base, and kind of giving some input where his expertise can be useful and he thinks it's valuable for you guys. And so before we kind of move on with the workshop, I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of some housekeeping rules. If you do have a question or would like to comment, please do so in the chat or during the time frames that we are going to allow for questions. So if you have a question, you can either ask it by typing it into the chat feature that GoToMeeting provides, or if you'd like to voice your question or don't have another way to ask a question, we will be taking a few little breaks for questions during the presentation, and at that time you can kind of verbalize your question to us, and we'll try our best to answer it, or at least write it down so we can get you an answer at a later date. And also, please make sure that your mics are muted during the workshop unless you are talking. That way there's no poor feedback from anyone's mics distracting others while they're trying to listen to the workshop, or me while I'm trying to present. All right, so before we move on to talking about the grants, I just wanted to provide you a little bit of information about CAPCOG. CAPCOG is the 10-county region that surrounds the capital. We're one of 24 planning commissions in the state. And you can see on that map how they're kind of made up. We represent Bastrop, Blanco, Burnett, Caldwell, Fayette, Hayes, Lee, Llano, Travis, and Williamson counties. And the reason that is important is if you're applying to provide services to one of those 10 counties, you guys are in the right place. And if you guys are applying to provide funding to a county outside of the CAPCOG region, you'll want to reach out to the COG that represents that county and figure out if they have a workshop or if there's another anything that they're requiring you to do in order to apply in their region. Our workshops and our rules and requirements for the CAPCOG region may be different than they are in other COGs around the state. So what does CAPCOG do? What does a regional planning commission do? We try and get the local governments in our area, which make up our board, to work together on issues that they would benefit from working together on. We are the emergency communications district in this 10-county area. We help direct the 911 calls to the appropriate telecommunicators and help train them to provide the proper or correct dispatching of services to people in need during emergency situations. We have an area agency on aging, which provides basically works to provide services and connect seniors and older adults to services that would benefit the older or aging community. We have a Homeland Security Planning and Training Program. It's similar to our Criminal Justice Program. They have a couple of grants they help with the Office of the Governor with, and do some planning and training on Homeland Security. Our Regional Law Enforcement Academy provides training to law enforcement officers, both law enforcement officer people who are looking to become law enforcement officers through our basic peace officer course, and to officers, current officers that are looking to get continuing education credit and learn more about enforcing the law in the capital area. We also have an air quality planning We also do air quality planning to try and help keep the region in attainment of the national air quality standards. We provide economic development analysis and technical assistance. We try and help local communities with grant applications, especially to the EDA grant programs, and we do offer technical assistance, data analysis, and things like that for local governments as well. Then we also have our solid waste planning program. We get funding from the TCEQ to help the local governments in our area with solid waste issues and help them plan for the future of solid waste in the community. We do receive enough funding from TCEQ to actually pass some of that money on to local governments to fund solid waste infrastructure like recycling and hazardous waste collections and things like that. And then finally, we do have our criminal justice grants program. This is why you guys are here today. We help applicants with their applications, and then also help facilitate our criminal justice advisory committee that recommends funding for these grant programs that we're going to talk about today to the Office of the Governor. So now that we've kind of provided you with a little bit of information on CAPCOG, we'll move on to what you guys are really here for, our grant writing workshop. Today we're going to go over the different funding opportunities, the 6 different funding opportunities that CAPCOG is helping the Office of the Governor with this year. What makes an organization eligible to apply for this funding, the standards and requirements that your organization must meet in order to be eligible to apply, some of the local policies and procedures that CAPCOG has in place and that you'll have to meet in order to apply in the CAPCOG region. We'll go over the RFAs and some of the details of those RFAs for the 6 funding opportunities that CAPCOG is helping with this year. Go over the regional and, well, just the regional priorities. The state priorities are actually in those RFAs. But we'll go over our regional priorities for this funding year or funding cycle. Go over some of the go over how to apply and some of the application resources that are available to you guys, kind of show you where you can go to find those resources. And then talk about what you do after your project has been recommended for funding, kind of what the process is to getting a grant and what you're going to do once you've received that grant. And then finally, we'll open up at the end for questions. Any questions you have, please feel free to ask them in the chat at any time. And then when we open up for those question and answer session, if you'd like to speak your question because you either can't use the chat feature or just prefer to talk, we'll allow you to do that at that time. And so before we kind of go into those funding opportunities, I just wanted to show you a few things that you'll need to get started. The first thing is the eGrants website. That's where you're going to go to start your application. It has all the materials you'll need to kind of fill out your application, and any forms and guidance that you're going to need are located there as well. The best way to find that eGrants site, if you're if you don't know the website or don't have a link to it, is just to search for eGrants Texas, and it should be one of the first few results that pop up. If you just search for eGrants, there's a lot of other eGrants in other states that'll pop up that might not be the right one. So if you're searching for eGrants, search for eGrants Texas to find it easiest. And then really the big thing why I put this slide here is the eGrants User's Guide to Creating an Application. This is a new guide that CJD, or actually the Office of the Governor, developed this fall, actually just published in December, that will walk you through the application process. It goes from starting your application, basically where we're at right now, and walks all the way through eGrants, going through all of the tabs and text boxes that you have to fill in, and kind of giving you some guidance on what CJD is what the Office of the Governor is looking for in those text boxes. And so here's what that guide looks like, hopefully. Yeah, here's what that guide looks like. And it just kind of walks you through egrants, explaining what things are and where you need to go to start your application, and all the way through the application process. So this is what it looks like when you open it up right here. This is the first page. All right, and so just one more thing before we move on. Each application will have 4 grant officials, and you'll need to have an account for each of those grant officials in eGrants. You need to set up an account for each of them. Well, for at least 3 of them will have to be unique. Those 3 unique grant officials are the project director. This is the person who's usually managing the day-to-day operations of the project, is the most in tune with what the project is trying to accomplish and what is going on with the project. Then there's the financial officer. This is the person who's going to be completing the FSR, making sure that all necessary documents are kept track of, financial documents are kept track of, and you are able to submit for your FSRs and get reimbursed for the activities that you're doing on your project. And then the third grant official is the authorized official. This is usually an executive director, county judge, mayor, or city manager person, the person who has the authority to obligate your funding for your organization. And that person is the person who has to certify your application after you've submitted it. The authorized official then has to go back in and certify the application, and that is a very important step because your application won't be considered if it's not certified. And the final grant official that we'll talk about is the grant writer, and that can be anyone. If you wanted it to be one of the 3 other grant officials, it could be that person, or it could be someone separate at your organization that specializes in just grant writing, or even a third-party grant writer that you've hired to write the grant for you guys. And just one more thing that you'll need to do before you get started working on your application in eGrants is you'll need to get a DUNS number, a Data Universal Numbering System number, and the link to get that number is located in the presentation. This number is pretty easy to get. You should be able to just go in and fill out the web form and get the number pretty quickly after that. There's also the system. You also need to register in the system for federal award management, and that process is a little bit longer. I believe it can take up to 10 days to get registered in SAM, and so you'll want to make sure that you register, get that process started early. So get started early so that you have all that you need to do to get started with your application. And I just wanted to go over that stuff before we jumped into the different funding opportunities, because those are things that you're going to need to do before you start your application. And having that user's guide at the ready at your fingertips when you start your application will make things go a lot smoother and will be a great resource for you while you're working through all of the different tabs in that application in eGrants. So this year, now we'll move on to talking about the funding opportunities that CAPCOG is going to be helping the Office of the Governor Criminal Justice Division with this year. The first program is the Criminal Justice Program. It's often called JAG, and you'll hear me refer to it as JAG throughout the presentation here. This program is funded through federal funds. You can see the exact source listed there underneath the program name. The next program that CAPCOG is helping with this year and has helped with for a while is the General Victims Assistance Direct Services Program. This program is often referred to as Voca, and that is because of the federal legislation that funded this program. And it is a federally funded program, just like the JAG program. The next program that we have listed here that CAPCOG helps with is the Juvenile Justice and Truancy Prevention Grant Program. This program is called JJ if your project is a juvenile justice project, or TP if your project that you're applying for is a truancy prevention project. And that is because this program is a state-funded program that has two separate funding sources, one for just juvenile justice projects and then one for truancy prevention projects. And so the CJD, after all the applications have been submitted, will separate those applications out. We'll talk a little bit more about how they kind of do that when we talk about the RFA specifics, and they'll separate those out and they'll be considered separately. And so it'll either be a juvenile justice or a truancy prevention project, and we'll label them as JJ or TP depending on which one they are. The next program that CAPCOG is helping with this year is the Residential and Community-Based Services for Victims of Commercial Sexual Exploitation of Youth. We refer to this program as Csa, and this is a federally funded program. The funds for this program come out of the same source as the Voca program. This program is sort of new to the CAPCOG review process. Last year, CJD asked us to do a kind of pass-fail type review of these projects, where we looked at them and in a small group of CJAC members and kind of reviewed them for their, see whether they were met the requirements of the project, and if they did, we gave them a pass, and if they didn't, we gave them a fail, and sent those recommendations to CJD for their consideration. This year, we are going to be reviewing these projects as these projects will be reviewed by the full CJAC under similar processes that the other programs that our CJAC reviews, under similar scoring that the other CJAC reviews the other programs that they have historically reviewed in the past. The next program is that CAPCOG is helping with this year is the Sexual Assault Forensic Exam Safe Ready Facilities Program. We're going to call this program SAFE. This is a new program to CAPCOG review this year, and this program will not be reviewed by the full CJAC in the traditional manner. It will be reviewed by a small group, kind of like the Csa program was reviewed last year. And there's some other details with this program that we'll talk about when we go over the RFA as well, that are a little bit different from the other programs that CAPCOG is helping with. And then the final grant program that CAPCOG is helping with this year is the Violence Against Women Justice and Training Program. This is a federally funded program that is often referred to as VAWA by CAPCOG and others. And this is a federally funded program as well, or as most of the grants are. So OOG does offer some other grants that are not reviewed by CAPCOG, and the best way to find out what those grants are and more information about them is to go to the eGrants calendar page, which you can get to by going to eGrants and then clicking on this calendar button here to go to the calendar page. It'll take you to this page that you see right here, our screenshot of, and you can find the RFAs for those programs by clicking the announcement button next to the program you're interested in. I have a list of different programs offered by CJD, offered by the Homeland Security Grants Division out of the Office of the Governor. They even have a Texas Music Office that offers some grants through eGrants. And so those all grants that go through eGrants will be listed here. And then the dates that they are open and the dates that they close are also listed on this site. It's a very useful site if you're looking to see what is available from the Office of the Governor, what grants are offered. And then next, I just wanted to make sure you guys were aware that all of the applications to the programs that CAPCOG is helping with this year, and many of the programs that are currently available on eGrants that CAPCOG is not helping with, are due at 5 p.m. on February 11th, 2021. That is about 2 weeks, or a little bit more than 2 weeks earlier than in the past, so you guys have less time than usual to get your applications in. And CAPCOG has actually kind of made this even a little bit tighter by having them due to us for a CAPCOG staff review by 5 p.m. on February 4th, 2021. For the CAPCOG review, you don't need to have your application completely completed and ready to be submitted and certified. What we really are looking for is we're going to look at the service area to make sure that you're providing services in the CAPCOG region, and your project period to make sure that that is within the allowable period for that program, for that grant program, so that we avoid confusion with our CJAC when they're looking at the applications and doing their reviews. We've kind of circumvented or cut out those issues that don't really affect the score, but maybe will cause questions and confusion during the review process. And so you don't have to have your application completed when you send it to us for review, but you should have had it started and kind of have filled in most of the, especially the cursory or easy text boxes to fill in, so that we can at least look at the service area and project period. The way that you will let us know that your project is ready for review is just by sending us a simple email. CAPCOG has an account in eGrants that we can use to access your application, and we'll go in and take a look at it, make sure everything looks right, and then we'll send you an email back letting you know that it is that we've looked at it and everything looks good, and you can go ahead and submit it. We'll look at them in the order that they come in. So if you send it to us earlier, we'll look at it sooner, and we'll try and get it, or we will make sure that we turn those around in about 48 hours, so that you guys can get our responses. We won't be doing as extensive, we won't be looking as extensively at them this year as we did last year, so these reviews should be turned around pretty quickly. But the main thing is that you have to get your application done and submitted and certified in eGrants by that February 11th date, because there will be no leeway if you don't get that done before the February 11th date. If you're having trouble meeting this February 4th deadline, just let me know. We probably won't have, we're not planning to do anything in terms of kind of punish people for not meeting that date, but we just want to make sure that we kind of head off those common issues that we've seen, where we've gotten questions and not really been able to, or had to go back and address them, and kind of distracted from the parts of the project, the parts of the application that really decide whether your project are being reviewed and being scored by the CJAC. And so again, CAPCOG will be doing a simple review of your service area and project period, and we'd like to see your application by 5 p.m. on February 4th, so that we can do those reviews. If you see an email from you telling us that your application is ready to be looked at by February 4th, and then you must have your application submitted and then certified by the authorized official before 5 p.m. on February 11th, 2021, or else your application will not be reviewed. If you go in and certify it at 5:01, CJ, it's not going to work out. CJD is going to tell you you're late, and you probably won't, and you won't get your application reviewed by the CJAC or considered for funding by OOG. So now we'll move on to seeing who is eligible. Organizations that are eligible are state agencies for 5 of the 6 programs that CAPCOG is helping with. The 6th program, the SAFE program, has a different set of eligible organizations. It's basically just hospitals. We'll go over the specifics of that program's eligible organizations when we talk about those RFAs. But for the other 5 programs that CAPCOG helps with, these are the eligible organizations. State agencies, public and private institutions of higher education. For Voca, Csa, and VAWA projects, those must be nonprofit institutions of higher education. Independent school districts are eligible. Native American tribes, councils of government, nonprofit corporations. This includes hospitals and faith-based organizations. Units of local government. These are statewide governmental bodies with the authority to establish a budget and impose taxes. This includes hospital districts. Local government agencies like your sheriff's office or your police department must have their application submitted by a unit of local government affiliated with the agency, including an authorizing resolution from that unit of local government. So if the Burnett County Sheriff's Office wanted to apply for a grant, Burnett County would need to be the applying agent, be the applicant, and that type of thing. That's how this works. And they want the body who has the authority to establish the budget and impose taxes to be the one that is receiving the grant award. So now that we know who is eligible, we move on to what you need to do to remain eligible and to comply with the grant requirements. The big kind of guidance documents that are out there in terms of grant management are the State Uniform Grant Management Standards, UGMs. This would be the document that is going to have most of the guidance about managing your grant for state grant programs. And then the Federal Uniform Grant Guidance. This is going to be the guidance that you'll be referencing for your federal grant projects. They're pretty similar, but there are some differences that you'll want to. So you'll want to make sure you're looking at the right one when you're, depending on where your funding is coming from. There are some better references for you instead of going straight to these uniform guidances, which are rather long and wordy and can be a great insomnia cure if you're looking for something like that. So some eligibility requirements. Applicants that operate a law enforcement agency must be current on reporting complete UCR data and Texas-specific reporting to DPS for inclusion in the Crime in Texas publication. And applicants must have submitted a full 12 months of accurate data to DPS for the most current year and are required to submit complete and accurate data on no less than a monthly basis and respond promptly to requests from DPS related to the data submitted. This is a requirement for applicants that are operating a law enforcement agency. One thing to know about that is that UCR is transitioning from summary reporting to NIBRs only in 2021. And applicants are encouraged to transition to NIBRs as soon as possible in order to maintain their grant eligibility. So the deadlines that we have there, Texas set a goal of September 1st of 2019 to get everyone moved to NIBRs. And the reason for that goal was that the FBI's deadline for collecting summary reporting reports for UCR was January 1st of this year, meaning that it's likely at some point soon UCR reports submitted through the summary reporting system will no longer be acceptable And so if your agency isn't reporting with NIBRs, it may not, even if it is trying to do the reporting, may not be able to do the required reporting without making a switch to NIBRs. And so we've got the agencies that are not currently, or we're not reporting NIBRs as of November of 2020 listed here. If your agency is on that list and you'd like to learn more about how to get in compliance with or make the switch to NIBRs, you can contact me and I can point you in the right direction, or you can go to the DPS website and they'll probably have some information there as well to help you moving towards being NIBRs, being a NIBRs reporting agency. And NIBRs, just so that you guys know, is the National Incident Based Reporting System, and it basically moves crime reporting from the old tablet and kind of tick method to a electronic method that can collect more data and kind of be more robust about what is reported and what the reports, what can be presented or collected after reviewing those reports. It's gone from, I think, like 7 different metrics, 7 different crimes to, I want to say, around 40 or so. So next requirement is the computerized criminal history reporting requirement. And this requirement is of any entity, public or private, in a county that does not report 90% or above of their criminal history dispositions will be ineligible to receive grants from any state or federal source managed by CJD. This has been a requirement for the last few years. This year, the reporting period for this requirement is 2015 through 2019. And the counties will need to be to 90% by August 1st of 2021. This, in my experience here, has not really been an issue for the CAPCOG region. We've had a few counties that have been, we usually have a few counties that are below 90% at the beginning of the year, but by April or May, usually all of the counties in the region are up to that 90% threshold. And so I would just kind of, if you're concerned about this, you might want to let it sit for a couple of months, and then maybe in March or April, reach out to your county attorney or county or district attorney's office and kind of let them know that your funding depends on getting these numbers up, and letting them know that this reporting has a big impact on a lot of grant funding to the region, so they can hopefully work on getting those numbers up if they're below that 90% threshold. Usually what happens with those organizations that are below 90% is that 5th year, that new year, so like 2019, will be at a pretty low percent, and they'll work through those and get that percentage up high enough so that the total average is above 90% by, usually by April of that year. So giving them a pretty good leeway. But we will be sending these percentages out as we receive them. Usually we receive them about once a month at the beginning of the month, and we'll send them out until the entire region is above the 90% threshold. So this eligibility requirement, convictions reporting to the Criminal Justice Information System at DPS, was a new requirement last year that I'm pleased to say all 10 counties in the CAPCOG region were able to meet last year. This year, this requirement has become a little bit tighter. Instead of counties being required to report within 7 business days, this year they're required to report convictions within 5 business days to the Criminal Justice Information System at DPS. And again, this one is just for the counties that are applying. So this requirement just restricts counties that are applying for this funding. So next we have an eligibility requirement requiring basically that organizations comply with any requests from the Department of Homeland Security regarding illegal aliens. And this is for local units of government that operate a law enforcement agency, and also that the city or county does not have a rule or a policy that prevents people from that organization from communicating with Department of Homeland Security or impeding officers from doing their or exercising their authority. There is a form that organizations with a law enforcement agency are required to sign. We've got a link to that form here. The form sometimes gives me a little bit of trouble when I click on the link, so you might need to just copy and paste that I guess website that you see at the bottom into your web browser to get that form to open up. There's also, I'll show you where that form is located in Egrant so that you can find it in Egrant, and that's probably the best way to go about finding it, because sometimes they'll update the forms that are available, and so they're not always the most current forms that I have linked in my presentation. So now that we've went over the requirements from the requirements for all of the grant programs from the RFA, talk about the CAPCOG Criminal Justice Advisory Committee Plan Year 2022 policy statement and some of the requirements in there. The first one, all applications must be submitted via eGrants. That is a CJD requirement. So that's the only way that you're going to get your application seen by the Office of the Governor anyways. Only applications for service in the CAPCOG region will be considered by the CJAC. You remember that map that we showed you? The CJAC is looking to review projects that are providing services in one of those 10 counties or multiple of those 10 counties. Organizations that are a part of a statewide association that applies for funding must apply through the statewide association. This language has usually been also included in the RFAs. I haven't noticed it as specifically in the RFAs this year, but in the Voca RFA, CASAs and child advocacy centers are called out to be required to apply in this way. So I think that they're still looking for organizations to apply in this way, but there may be other organizations that can apply, that have a statewide association that can apply, and it's just those two. I haven't got a clear read on that yet. Applicants are required to attend the CJAC application review and prioritization meeting. We'll talk a little bit about what goes on at that meeting here in near the end of the presentation. Organizations can submit a maximum of 3 applications per fund source. Applications will be grouped into 3 tiers, with all applications from each tier being considered for recommendation before any projects in a lower tier. Organizations are allowed 1 application per tier and will self-select the tiers for their application before the applications are reviewed. Applications must receive a score of at least 70 to be recommended for funding by the CJAC. And before the CJAC review, applicants will be required to submit the minimum grant amount needed to conduct their projects. That'll be submitted when you send us your preferred presentation time. Later when we ask for your presentation time for the application review and prioritization meetings. And so I think I'll be answering your question, Sherry, now. So there are some specific requirements for 3 of the programs that CAPCOG works with. For the Voca program, the General Victims Assistance Direct Services Program, nonprofits are limited to 1 application, and all other organizations are limited to 1 application per unit district, or division. Applications may not be for more than 50% of an agency's total operating budget. And first-time applicants can only submit one application. That really doesn't apply since all organizations are required to only submit one application for the Voca program this year. For the Criminal Justice Program, projects are limited to 3 years, and they have a decreasing funds ratio so that in year 2, applications are limited to 80% of what is awarded in year 1. And in year 3, applications are limited to 60% of what was awarded in year 1, with equipment-only requests being considered one-time projects. The Juvenile Justice and Truancy Prevention Grant Program, specifically the Juvenile Justice Project side, also has this 3-year decreasing funds ratio in place, with projects limited to 3 years, with year 2 being limited to 80% of the year 1 award, and year 3 applications limited to 60% of the year 1 award. And so, as you can see, CJD, our tier system kind of makes it so one application is likely all that is going to be able to be recommended for funding under Voca, but because of the number of applications that CJD is expecting, because they're going from a 1-year or 2-year grant cycle to a 1-year grant cycle, so they expect about twice as many applications to be reviewed this year as were reviewed last year. They've kind of tried to limit the number of applications they're getting, and so there's only one application allowed for the Voca program this year. And so going back to the tier process, basically the tier process means that if you submit 3 applications, your first application, or you'll select one of those applications to be in tier 1, 1 into tier 2, and 1 into tier 3, and all of the projects that go into tier 1 will be considered for funding prior to any of the applications that go into tier 2. So if you score, so say your project scored a 100 and a 90, and your tier 2 or your tier 1 project scored a 90 and your tier 1 project or 2 project scored a 100, the tier 1 project would still be considered before that tier 2 project, even though it scored better. We'd wait until all of the projects that fell under tier 2 or tier 1 were considered before we go to the projects that fell under tier 2. And that's sort of to make sure that all of the organizations, to spread the money further to more organizations, instead of having an organization come in and submit 3 applications and get all 3 funded. They would have to wait until all of the other organizations that submitted an application are funded or do not meet the minimum score before their second application was recommended for funding. I hope that helps kind of with the tier projects. And if it's still not clear, we'll definitely try and clear up any questions about the tier section during our questions and answers section, which is actually just coming up now. So yeah, if you guys have any questions, now is the time for them to be asked. We'll try and answer them, a few of them now. Any questions on what we went over so far? Sherry, you're correct in your assessment for the Voca, the General Victims Assistance Direct Services Program. The 3-tier system does not apply because you're only allowed to submit 1 application. That is correct. Jessica, the the decreasing fund ratio only applies to the juvenile justice projects, not the truancy prevention projects. And Ken's answer is correct, except for the General Victim Services Direct Services Program, the Voca program. That program is only allowing one application. I'm not 100% sure. Jose, I don't believe that there's a restriction on the Csa grants in terms of number of applications, but I'll have to look a little bit closer at the RFA to be sure. But I don't remember seeing that. Sure. And so, Will, I'm not aware of any changes to the Csa grant. I think that they may be prioritizing specific types of services, but your project, I believe, was in the emergency services section, and that's the one that they're prioritizing most this year. That would be the only thing that I can really say for sure. So, Aaron, I'm kind of I'm trying to answer your question, Aaron, and I don't know what you mean by headquartered or what you're referring to.
Well, what I'm referring to is we're a statewide organization
Mm-hmm.
in San Antonio, Texas.
Yeah.
However, we have a very strong presence in your area, but our headquarters is not based there. But we do have several buildings with several of our programs, and we still apply because we do serve a large amount of clients there, and we do have physical office space there, even though our headquarters is in a different area.
I'm sorry if I said headquarters. As long as you're applying to provide your application is to provide services in the CAPCOG region, you're eligible to be reviewed by the CJAC.
Perfect. Thank you.
And so yeah, so as long as you're providing those services in our region, your application is eligible, even if you're headquartered in a different city or COG. We just want to make sure that we are reviewing projects that are going to help the CAPCOG region and not going to, help other counties or areas, because it's kind of unfair for a CJAC made up of people representing the CAPCOG region to review projects for other areas. Is the way I look at it, at least.
Got it. Thank you. That makes sense. I appreciate your clarification.
I think the Voca process will be longer this year. We'll have twice as many applications. The funding should be I wouldn't say that it's more limited this year, but there will be more applications to review this year. We're probably going to see about twice as many Voca applications as we have seen in the past few years. And so there'll be a lot more to look at and a lot more to review. But I think that as far as money available goes, there's pretty close to the same funding available. Yes, so the truancy prevention and JJ projects will have separate funding sources, and so they will be considered separately. And if you apply and have a project that falls into each, you could have a Tier 1 truancy prevention project and a Tier 1 juvenile justice project. As far as budget estimates for the programs, we have not received them. We've been told that we won't receive them until probably March timeframe. So unfortunately, we can't provide you with those until after it would be kind of beneficial for your applications. But we will have them at some we'll have them at some point, and we will share them when we get them. The separation happened last year as well. So that was the first year that it happened, was last year. The separation of the truancy prevention and juvenile justice projects. Marla, I'm not 100% sure how to answer that or how we do that. I will get back to you with that in our frequently asked questions document. Yes, Michael. All of the Voca programs except for the mental health the Officer Mental Health Program and the Csa Program have been combined into one grant program. There may be another one, but I'm not recalling the other one. But they have kind of combined some of the Voca grant programs together, or eliminated some of the other grant programs, and asked those applicants, those projects to apply through the General Victims Assistance Program. Aaron, we're fixing to go into the RFAs, and I will answer your question when we get to the kind of prohibitions of the Voca program. So it'll be just a couple minutes, but we'll answer your question here in a couple seconds. And so now we'll move on to talking about some of the RFAs that for the programs that CAPCOG is helping with. The first opportunity that we'll look at is the General Victims Assistance Direct Services Program, or Voca Program. The purpose of this program is to provide services and assistance directly to victims of crime to speed their recovery and aid them through the recovery process. These projects must begin on or after October 1st of 2021 and end on or before September 30th of 2022. Projects may not exceed a 12-month award, so CJD will no longer be making 2-year awards under this program. All applications will be for 1 year, and then we'll have to return next year to apply again for additional funding. The minimum application to this program is $10,000 with no maximum required, or no maximum, and a 20% match required. This match can be cash or in kind. The eligible activities and costs are crisis services, forensic interviews under specific parameters, legal advocacy, multidisciplinary teams and case coordination, peer support groups, professional therapy and counseling, programs, program evaluation and assessment, protective order assistance, shelter programs, transitional housing, and victim offender meetings. So I believe, Aaron, that professional therapy and counseling would cover the psychiatry for victims. So with those activities, the eligible activities, there is quite an extensive list or so you'll want to make sure you go to the RFA and kind of look at what CJD defines as these different activities before you start your application, so you can make sure that the service that you're providing fits under the activity that you're listing in your application. Yeah, Jose. So Csa and GVA, they have the same. There's the same funding source in terms of where the money is coming from, but they've split it up into two different pots of money for the purposes of CJD grants. So the programs are separated out, and CJD has decided to have a special project or application for Csa projects, and then also have the traditional GVA or General Victims Assistance Direct Services program available as well. And so yeah, even though they are both Voca funding, CJD has kind of come in and split that Voca money up to fund the Csa project and the General Victims Assistance Direct Services project, and I think also the mental health first responders program or something like that that's supposed to provide mental health services to law enforcement officers and other first responders. So the Voca program does have some specific requirements to this program. Those include the project must demonstrate an effective record of service to victims of crime and support from sources other than the Crime Victims Fund. And this basically means that you have support of the community for your services, and that they've been provided in a cost-effective manner, and that you have a breadth and depth of financial support from a source other than the Crime Victims Fund. And that can be achieved by showing that the organization has at least 25% of their program's funding in the year of or the year preceding the award coming from a different source other than the Crime Victims Fund. Applicants must be culturally competent when providing services to victims. Cultural competency occurs when cultural knowledge, awareness, and sensitivity are integrated into action and policy. The service is relevant to the needs of the community and provided by trained staff, board members, and management. And an advocate or organization recognizes each client is different with different needs, feelings, ideas, and barriers. All recipients of funding under this announcement may be required to participate in a victim service assessment/survey during the grant period. That is a survey that will be administered by CJD and is different from the needs survey that CAPCOG conducts every kind of late summer in August and September. And then finally, nonprofits will be eligible to purchase vehicles under this funding, and only nonprofits will be eligible to purchase vehicles under this funding announcement, and the vehicles must be for transporting victims to services. And here is the list of things that are prohibited under the Voca program. It's a pretty long list here. When you're working on your application, when you start your budget, you'll want to have this list next to you and make sure you're not including any of these things in your budget, because they will get cut out and you'll get less funding than you applied for if you're applying for something that is prohibited. I am not sure if the match will be waived. I haven't heard anything saying that it would. So I can't answer your question on that, but I will look into it and put it in the FAQ document that we send out. Sorry. So I believe you might have to fit community education and outreach into a separate category, although I'm thinking that some of that stuff may be ineligible. So you may want to look into it, and I can help you do a little bit of digging about that if you wanted to share specifically what you're going to do in terms of education and outreach in an email at a later date. And yeah, Hosey, you're correct. You could have a tier 1 project in Csa and a tier 1 project in the Voca or GVA DS program. So moving on to the VAWA program. This is the Violence Against Women Justice and Training Program. It's for projects that promote a coordinated multidisciplinary approach to improve the justice system's response to violent crimes against women, including domestic violence, commercial sex trafficking, sexual assault, dating violence, and stalking. And these projects must start on or after September 1st of 2021 and end before September 30th of 2022. There is a minimum application amount of $5,000 with no maximum. This program requires a 25% match. The eligible costs and activities under this program are costs and activities that address violent crimes against women, and they include developing or installing, expanding data collection and communication systems, training for criminal justice professionals, developing or enlarging or strengthening programs that address needs of older and disabled women, developing, implementing, or enhancing sexual assault response teams or similar responses to sexual assault, developing, training, or expanding units of criminal justice professionals, supporting efforts to coordinate a statewide response, developing and strengthening policies, protocols, and best practices, and training for investigations and prosecution of sexual assault, developing protocols protocols and policies for addressing backlogs of sexual assault evidence collection kits, developing and implementing more effective policies, protocols, orders, and services, training of sexual assault forensic medical personnel examiners, identifying and conducting inventories of backlogs of sexual assault evidence collection kits, and developing and promoting policies that enhance best practices. Yeah. So we did have a question about number 15, any cost related to a third-party participation in training. This basically means you can't pay for people to attend your training or pay to attend a training that has been developed with the grant funds. And so that's like if you're developing a training, you can't pay for people to come to your training and attend. They would need to pay for themselves, or the person would need to pay for themselves without using grant funds. So on the question about the project being funded 50% Voca and 50% VAWA, you would basically need to have two different projects broken out to be one doing the things that are under the Voca program, and then one doing the things that are under the VAWA program. And you might put in your application that it is like a combined project, but they would have to be separate applications. But if the services kind of work together, you might be able to put in an application that is Voca and VAWA. One thing to note is that all direct services projects typically get pushed to the Voca program because there's more funding available there. And so if your project is about providing services directly to victims of crime, even if it's focused on violent crimes against women, that project will likely end up in the Voca pot and at a later date maybe move back to VAWA if there's funding available over there, or CJD needs to meet their required dollar amounts for the VAWA program and direct services. So we went over the snapshot here on the VAWA program. Now we'll move on to this program. The one program specific requirement for the VAWA program has to do with legal assistance for victims. Basically says that you will be using the people that will be providing any assistance or any training will be experts in the area, experts at providing services to victims of violent crimes against women, that they'll partner with people who have expertise and will complete training that will help them that'll help them identify risk factors and help them understand how to interact with victims of violent crimes. And then also says that you're going to work with professionals that work in that area as well, local professionals and state professionals, when you're providing training or when you are providing training on legal assistance, or when you are actually providing legal assistance to victims. And then the fourth bullet down there says that an organization cannot require offenders and victims to meet together for mediation or counseling. And these are the things that are prohibited under the VAWA program. Another pretty long list of things that are prohibited. Most of the stuff prohibited comes from the actual federal act that funds these programs, these federal programs, and so that's why there's usually quite a bit more prohibitions under the federal programs than there are under the state programs, and you'll see that here when we go over a few of the state programs in a little bit. And again, like I said, with the Voca program, there's a lot of things that are prohibited. You want to make sure you're checking your budget against the things that are on this list and making sure that stuff in your budget doesn't fall into this list, so that you guys can get all the funding that you're requesting and not have things cut out of your budget because they're prohibited. So now moving on to the residential and community-based services for victims of commercial sexual exploitation of youth, the Csa Program. The purpose of this program is to support programs that help recover youth and adult victims of commercial sexual exploitation and support their healing through immediate and long-term services. Projects for this program must begin on or after October 1st of 2021 and expire on or before September 30th of 2022. These projects may not exceed a 12-month grant period. The minimum application amount for this program is $25,000 with no maximum, and there is a 20% match required for this program that can be cash or in-kind match. So the list of eligible activities and costs include emergency residential placements, long-term residential placement, Csa advocate programs, community-based drop-in, assessment, or street outreach programs, specialized trauma responsive behavioral health community, and innovative services for child sex trafficking victims. And so if your project doesn't fall into one of those first 5 activities, that's when you'll go into that innovative services for child sex trafficking victims activity program area. And I do believe, like I said, that they are prioritizing funding to emergency residential placement programs this year, because they're still trying to kind of build that infrastructure up. So for this program, there are a few more requirements that are above and beyond the requirements for the other grant programs. These include that eligible applicants will be required to provide regular reports reflecting a project's progress. This is in addition to the normal progress reports that you're supposed to submit in eGrants. Eligible applicants will also be required to adhere to the relevant guiding principles for the child sex trafficking team and its partners. This list can be found in the RFA. It's basically a list of guidelines for you to kind of do your work by, and what the governor's office of the governor's child sex trafficking team kind of works, the principles that guide their work. There's also eligible participants will be required to implement the Cesit screening tool where applicable. This is a child sexual exploitation identification tool. If you click on that link there, it'll take you to a website that'll provide more information on the tool. Eligible applicants will be required to collect and submit de-identified survey responses from survivors. And then the last one is eligible applicants must meet specific special requirements for the type of project that they are applying to conduct. So in the RFA, there are a list of different requirements that you must meet in order to be eligible for the different project or activity type that you're going to conduct. And so you'll need to look at the RFA and make sure you guys are your application and your program, your organization meets those requirements before applying to provide those services or conduct those activities. And there are some program-specific requirements. These are the same requirements that we saw for the Voca program. Project must demonstrate a record of effective services to victims of crime and support from sources other than the Crime Victims Fund. Applicants must be culturally competent when providing services to victims. And then all recipients may be required to participate in a victim services assessment or survey during the grant period, and only nonprofits are eligible to purchase vehicles under this announcement. The vehicles must be for transporting victims to services. And then finally, we've got the prohibitions for the Csa program. These are fairly similar to the prohibitions for the Voca program. One thing we'll notice here that was not prohibited under the Voca program, but is prohibited under the Csa program, is transitional housing. And that just wanted to point that out. That was the one thing I noticed that was prohibited in this program and not prohibited under that program. There were a couple things that were also that are not prohibited here that are prohibited in the Voca program as well. So you want to make sure you're using the right RFA and looking at these list of prohibitions. And look at this list of prohibitions after you or when you're building your budget, so you make sure you're not including prohibited items in your application. All right, now we'll move on to the Sexual Assault Forensic Exam Safe Ready Facilities Program snapshot. This program is meant to fund hospitals seeking to achieve or maintain a sexual assault forensic exam safe ready designation as defined in Chapter 323 of the Texas Health and Safety Code. For this program, projects must begin on or after September 1st of 2021 and end on or before September 30th of 2022. The maximum application amount is $50,000 with no minimum application amount. So that's kind of different from our other programs in that there is a maximum amount but no minimum amount Remember, for our other programs, they have always had a minimum amount with no maximum. So remember that if you're planning to apply for this program, you can only apply for up to $50,000, but there is no match required. The eligible activities for this program include basic sexual assault forensic evidence collection training as defined by the Texas Health and Safety Code, an initial and continuing education of sexual assault forensic examiners as defined by the Texas Health and Safety Code, equipment and supplies for providing these exams, and then salary and overtime. This would be limited only to sexual assault forensic examiners that are attending training or the backfilling of their position while they are attending training. So like I said, this grant program has a different set of eligible organizations, and those are basically just hospitals. We've got general and special hospitals licensed under the Texas Health and Safety Code, general or special hospitals owned by the state of Texas, and freestanding emergency medical care facilities licensed under the Texas Health and Safety Code. And those are the only organizations that are eligible to apply for the SAFE program. We've also got the things that are prohibited listed on this slide. Again, or you can see, because this is state funding, the things that are prohibited are much less than the programs that we have just went through. So it's a little easier to kind of check and make sure you're not applying for something that is prohibited for this program than it is for the federal programs that we have went through earlier. All right, moving on to the Criminal Justice or JAG program. The purpose of this program is to promote public safety, reduce crime, and improve the criminal justice system. These projects must begin on or after October 1st of 2021 and may not exceed a 12-month project period. The minimum application amount is $10,000 with no match required, and funding may be used to provide additional personnel, equipment, supplies, contractual support, training, technical assistance, and information systems for criminal justice purposes, including these are the list of activities that are eligible. If you have a project that's not one of these, you might need to make it fit under one of these when you're applying, because I believe these are the list of activities. But as long as it's serving a criminal justice purpose, which the definition for that is in the RFA, it should be eligible for this under this program. One thing to note is that CJD has put a point of emphasis on safe policing for safe communities this year. This point of emphasis comes out of an executive order signed by the president over the summer as a result of some of the things that went on and the protests that happened this summer. And the things that he's seeking to emphasize are to enhance law enforcement practices and build community engagement through officer credentialing, the usage of community support modeling, implementation of improved use of force policies and procedures, retention and recruitment of high-performing officers, covenantal access to mental health services for officers, programs aimed at relationship building between law enforcement and communities, and supporting nonprofit organizations that focus on improving stressed relationships between officers and communities. And there's no real funding or priority placed on this point of emphasis that I have heard, but it is something that has been emphasized in the RFA, and you may look to, if you have a project that fits into any of those things identified, you may look to apply for that, and it may be seen as seen favorably by the by CJD. Here's the list of prohibitions for the JAG program. A lot of these things that are listed here, like the DNA evidence collecting, the Operation Border Star program have separate grant programs that are available. And so you'll want to go to that eGrants site that the calendar that we showed you to look for those programs. Another thing that you'll want to look at before you complete your application is the JAG prohibited expenditures list. It contains things that are prohibited to be purchased under the JAG program, and that list was updated in July of 2020 is the last I saw, so you probably should take a look at it before you start your application this year. It might have changed a little bit. So now we'll look at our final program, the Juvenile Justice and Truancy Prevention Grant Program. This program is for projects that prevent violence in and around schools and to improve the juvenile justice system by providing mental health services, truancy prevention, and intervention through community-based and school programs. Projects for this program should begin on or after September 1st of 2021 and may not exceed a 12-month grant period. This program has a $10,000 minimum application amount with no maximum and no match required. The eligible purpose areas for the Juvenile Justice and Truancy Prevention Grant Program are mental health services, school programs, community-based programs and services, truancy prevention, and juvenile case managers. And if your project is just providing or just within those last two, the truancy prevention and the juvenile case managers, it will likely be considered a truancy prevention project and put into that bucket, that funding source. And if it's any of the other ones or includes any of the other ones with the truancy prevention or juvenile case manager purpose area, it will fall under the juvenile justice projects area. And unfortunately, this year, this is the only program area that we're thinking will see a rather drastic or significant decrease in funding availability, both for the juvenile justice and truancy prevention projects. We could see up to a 20% reduction in funding available for those programs. And that is due to the decrease in fees that were collected that fund those programs over the last year. So they're both the funding sources. The Truancy Prevention Program was a program that was developed by the legislature a few years ago, or I guess called out by the legislature a few years ago to kind of provide truancy prevention and juvenile case managers. And in the last few years, there's been a reduction in the juvenile justice funding that was available, and so they were kind of toying with the idea of rolling those together as one grant program, but I guess that there was reasons that they needed to kind of separate them out for scoring and review purposes, and so they've have them in as one grant application grant program, but the because of the requirements of the truancy prevention program, according to legislature, they had to split those out for funding because a lot of the juvenile justice projects didn't fit into that. I guess the amount that was budgeted for that program or fit into the eligible activities for that program, and so they couldn't just move them over to that program, and so they had to split it apart to make sure that only the eligible activities for the truancy prevention projects were funded under that fund source, I guess. I'm sorry for the long-winded answer, but I hope it provided the information you needed. And then these are the list of things that are prohibited for the Juvenile Justice and Truancy Prevention grant program. You can see again, because it is state funded, there's not an extra layer of red tape, meaning that there's not a ton of things listed here. But you still want to make sure that you're referencing the prohibitions list in the RFA when you're applying when you're filling out your budget and applying to the Juvenile Justice and Truancy Prevention Grant Program. So we're going to go ahead and skip this question section and move right on. So the 3-year funding limit, Kathy, is just for the juvenile justice projects. Truancy prevention projects don't have a 3-year funding limit like the juvenile justice projects at this time. I'm going to move right into talking a little bit more about some of the resources that are available and some of the things that are out there and the CAPCOG review process. So first, this slide shows the Plan Year 2022 Criminal Justice Funding Priorities. These priorities were developed this fall with help from a regional needs survey that was conducted in September, and 2 stakeholder meetings that were held in October where stakeholders gave input on the priorities, and CAPCOG kind of took that input, developed some priorities and definitions, and then presented those to the Criminal Justice Advisory Committee, the CJAC, for review and approval. And this was the result, these 5 priorities here: access to a continuum of comprehensive services that meet victim and community needs, access to resources including equipment, technology, and facilities, adequate and well-trained staff in all areas of criminal justice, communication, collaboration, and coordination among stakeholders, including members of the community and consumers of criminal justice services, community outreach, education, awareness, and engagement to promote crime prevention and early intervention. And I've got a link here that'll go to, here, we'll show you guys where it goes real quick, maybe, yes. Goes to the priorities with the lists of the activities or services that fall under them. And you can also go to our grants page to find definitions of those services that are available. Next, we'll kind of go through some of the resources that are available to you. This first one is probably the most useful resource for applying, and it goes to the Egrant System Updates page. And this is the page that it goes to that has a lot of information. This page has everything you need to work on your application, all the forms, guides, anything like that. It's located on this page. And when you're in eGrants, to get to this page, you just click on the Updates button right there, and it'll take you to this page here. It's got a bunch of drop down, or a few things that if you hit view will drop down. The introduction is not really useful for you guys. Kind of tells you what's here, or why they have this here. Instructions, unless you're familiar with the this page already, they're just basically showing you what has changed with these instructions with this spreadsheet that'll open up when you click the link there. The civil rights page, this is actually information on what CJD, what the Office of the Governor is doing to prevent discrimination and comply with all the civil rights requirements and laws. Not necessarily the training for you that we've provided in the past, although that is available here under miscellaneous. If you go down to training, you'll see that information on civil rights. This is the presentation that we have typically given that we're not going to give today, but if you wanted to see it, it's there. There's also a link to the Department of Justice Civil Rights website for more information on civil rights pertaining to recipients of federal funds. But the most important part of this or menu in this on this site is the forms and guides section. So you click, there's a long list of things that drop down. The most important one is probably this under this create an application, eGrants user guide to creating an application. That's that guide that I talked about earlier. This is where you can find it on eGrants. There's actually another place you can find it on eGrants, and maybe I'll show you that here after we get done going over this, but this is where it's located. There's also some other guides available for the Homeland Security grant applicants. These are probably not applicable to you for the programs that we've talked about today, but if you're applying for any of those Homeland Security grants, you might look at those guides. We've got the application resources. This Developing a Good Project Narrative Guide is basically the same presentation that I have been giving in past years on the narrative sections. So you want to use that if you want to figure out kind of what to include in your narrative. We've got registering a new user guide. So this is a guide to help you get an account in eGrants and making sure that you're all set up to start your application. Got some FAQs down here. The one that I have referenced even recently is this PSO General FAQ. It was updated in September and has been helpful to me I had a few questions about, what's it called? About the transferring equipment from one agency to another, and I was able to find answers in that FAQ. So you want to look there if you have questions and you're not able to get a hold of me or your grant manager. The FAQ may have the answers you're looking for. It also has links to all of the forms that you may need to submit in your application. CEO/law enforcement certification and insurance form that we talked about earlier is there. We've got a sample resolution if you need to get a resolution from your governing body, and the other forms that you may need to submit. We've also got some grant management guidance. We've got the Guide to Grants, which I've talked about a little bit already, but is a great resource if you have questions about how you're supposed to manage your grant. That's a good place to go. Much more simple than those uniform guidances that are provided. It's way easier to use than those. And then there's also the Guide to Financial Management as well there. There's some common monitoring findings if you're wanted to kind of make sure that you are not falling into some of the traps that other grantees have fallen into. You can go look at that to see what the common issues are with grants and maybe address those before your project gets audited. And then if you are applying to purchase radios or any type of communication equipment, you may need to get approval from SWCC, State Interoperability Coordinator. And you can do this by clicking on this link, and it'll show you the steps to going through that. We've got some videos here that show you how to edit budget line items and do other things in eGrants. They're useful if you're confused or want to see how things are more of a visual learner. These will show you exactly how to do some operations in eGrants and kind of work on your application. We've got some resources available here as well, and information on your audit, on the single audit requirements and audit requirements here as well. And again, like I said, those create an application user guide, very valuable, located here. Got some developing a good project narrative here. The PSO general frequently asked questions, all the forms you may need to apply, and then your guide to grants. Those are going to be things that are most valuable to you on this page. Move back. We will go now to the CAPCOG resources page. See? CAPCOG resources page has more things to help applicants with like data or evidence-based practices. We've got a link to our most current strategic plan here. We've got a link to our Criminal Justice Grants page, which has our policies and the schedule for the Criminal Justice Program. That's the page you want to go to if you're looking to kind of learn about when things are and what we're doing. And then we've also got the crime in CAPCOG, which has crime data for all of the jurisdictions in the CAPCOG region from 2008 to 2019. It's got some tables and some maps on crime in the region, and also on change in crime in the region. And then some links to some resources for evidence-based practices if you're looking to kind of justify why your project works, or ideas for projects. These are some good resources for that. And then finally, the OOG resources page. This is going to have a link to eGrants, the guide to grants, and the eGrant support page, that page that we just walked through on eGrants. And those are going to be the most useful links on this page here. The other links go to more the guidance and standards and requirements for these grant programs that are a little bit more in depth than these other documents, more detailed, more specific. All right. So after going through the resources, we want to learn a little bit more about what happens during the CJAC review and prioritization meeting, learn more about them. These meetings occur in April or March. This year, we will likely have 4 days of meetings, possibly broken up into justice programs. So that would be the JAG program, the Juvenile Justice Program, and the Truancy Prevention Program, and victims programs, which would be VAWA, Voca, and the Csa Program. And we'll probably do those justice programs in late March, based on when we've heard we're thinking about getting. CJD is planning to get us the applications, and the victims programs will be done probably in mid-April because of when we're receiving those applications. But we haven't been able to nail down dates just yet. We're going to try and do that over the next few weeks probably, and we'll post the meeting dates on our website when we've identified them. Applicants are required to attend these meetings, and they are asked to give a 5-minute presentation on their project and then answer a question from the CJAC on that project. Basically, the CJAC is trying to figure out how they should score that project when they ask those questions. CJAC will score the application after the presentation, and an application score will be determined by the CJAC average without the highest and lowest scores. So we'll remove the highest and lowest score and then average the scores from the rest of the CJAC members to get your total score. Results will be presented to the CJAC in order of score for consideration and recommendations. Although it is rare, the CJAC does have the ability or the authority to adjust the prioritization order or recommended funding amounts. Like I said, that is rare, but they do have the ability, if there's a specific area that they feel needs to be funded, they can direct projects that are working in that area and move them around. They really haven't done that in my experience, but it is something that can happen. And we have posted our CJAC applications, our application scoring guidance document on our website, and I recommend taking a look at that and using that when building when writing your narratives, or at least referencing it, so that you're making sure that you're hitting on the things that are that you're going to be reviewed and scored on. There, And then finally, this slide shows kind of what happens um, when once you have been recommended for funding. The awards from CJD will not come until the fall of 2021, maybe not even until after your project period has started. But as long as you haven't received an unfunded notice over the summer, your project is, CJD is expecting to fund your project. So until you receive an unfunded notice, you should operate as if your project is going to be funded. And that means responding to any preliminary review reports that are sent to you for more information on your project over the summer, and just being responsive to CJD, because they will send those unfunded notices before they send the awards, and the unfunded notices will usually come in August. The awards will come once CJD has completed their review of your application. They like to try and do that before projects start, but if they can't, they may have to delay it until after the start date of your project. But if you don't receive a unfunded notice, like I said, your project is likely to be funded. And if you operate as if your project is going to be funded and don't receive a award notice until after your project start date, you would still be able to request reimbursement for funds that were spent during your project period before you got your award, as long as those funds were spent after the start of the project, the start date of the project, which is listed in Egrants. So applicants that are funded must submit progress reports quarterly in a tab in Egrants. And then financial reports also must be submitted at least quarterly. They can be submitted, I think, up to monthly through the financial status reports tab in eGrants. And in order to receive funding, you must submit those financial status reports, and then CJD will reimburse you for the costs that you have incurred over that time period, based on your FSR that you submit. Thank you very much. We'll answer any questions that you have in the next 10 or 15 minutes. Please let me know if you have any questions. So the data book, it's not. I'm trying to update some of the information, the 2019 census information added to it. That was just released in December, but I do have it, and I actually have a link to a OneDrive folder like I sent y'all last year with some useful documents and stuff, and it will be in there, and I'll send that link out probably later today. I'm not sure that the data book that we have will be completely updated. All of the census data will be updated, but all of the other data should be updated and current, and I will save that data book with the updated census information at a later date as soon as I get it complete. It shouldn't take too much longer, but there's a little bit more that I need to do to get that information in. The data book would be a good source for census information, for statistics. We have on our website, we have a demographic workbook that's available that provides some information on housing and population and some of those statistics. I can include a link to that for you in the email that I send with the OneDrive link as well. I think that drones are eligible, but I'm not 100% sure on that, so we'll have to do some research. I know that on that prohibited list, there's some prohibitions on vehicles, which I'm not sure if a drone is considered a vehicle, but that might be something that we need to confirm, and we'll figure out an answer to that and get it in our frequently asked questions document for you. All right, do we have any more questions today? Anybody that wants to say anything or anything else? Here, I'll show you where the link is to this, the scoring guidance. And so Natalie, it's going to be, I know it's in this table somewhere. I just need to find it. There it is, right in the middle. Scoring, PY22 CJAC scoring criteria. And this is the document that we have. And it basically is meant for the CJAC to kind of tell them how to score projects, but would be very useful for you guys, obviously, to know what criteria they're using to score those projects. So this is on our criminal justice grants page, and will also be in that OneDrive folder that we are going to send you guys a link to as well. All right, thank you guys very much, and hope to hear from, or I guess I'll probably hear from some of you later, and see a lot of you in March and April for the prioritization review and prioritization meetings. Thank you. Have a great day, guys.